Yes, indeed, that was the error, and that we felt that if it's not corrected, obviously it will remain. Because when you talk about the office of the premier, you're talking about a fully fledged department within Gauteng, which really constitute about 350 plus employees. Whereas when you talk about the premier, you talk about a person in the form of David Makura in this instance.
Mm-hmm.
So that correction we needed to make, and the judge considered on that.
Vuyo, is there also an issue around the use of the term the MEC versus the use of the term the office of the MEC? Has a decision
Yeah,
been
no, no,
made
that,
by the tribunal making exactly the same error in terms of the use MEC?
No, indeed, the judge also corrected that particular aspect because it was in the same lining. So it was also corrected. Instead of saying the MEC, it was actually written the office of the MEC.
So what kind of correction will take place in terms of that error? Because, I mean, obviously this impacts the people who occupy these offices directly.
No, no, indeed. The premier has even went further to say it's not only correct to exonerate him as a person, but it is very important to make sure that plus 350 employees that work in that particular department, they are equally exonerated so that they don't walk around the Gauteng government with a tag that some amongst them, they are actually correct. Hence, then the premier has actually requested the digital right to the office of the SIU to make sure that we are able to clear any wrongdoing that would have been there and actually get to the bottom of it. Who among these people really spoke to the former CFO?
Mm. So this use of the term MEC, that's as it relates to the education MEC, Panyaza Lesufi.
No, 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 no. Remember, the issue of the special tribunal was speaking about the issue of health. So the genesis of that, there was a contestation by the former CFO that her pension cannot be frozen, so she needed an access to that. So the SIU was contesting that aspect. So in the really final judgment of the judge then on the 10th of December, he actually made this particular error that we sought to correct.
So in terms of this list that was provided, the list of companies to be appointed as suppliers of personal protective equipment, was there such a list that was issued by the Office of the Premier?
That's why we have requested the SIU head, Advocate Mtobi has actually agreed that will investigate. So that's process we have given it to the SIU. At the moment, we are not in position of the list, if it was given or not, except what is written in the affidavit. And we want to go further, as I've said, to say who, therefore, has actually given that particular list within the Department of Health of the Premier.
I mean, that's the former CFO of the Department of Health that testified that that list was issued by the Office of the Premier for a list of prescribed providers of personal protective equipment.
Yes, indeed. That's what the former CFO said in the affidavit. That's why the interest of the Premier is that we therefore need to know who actually gave her those particular names.
Easy enough to track down, Vuyo?
Well, it's the issue is important that we must take everything to the credible institution in the form of the SIU. And when the report comes, the Premier has always been very consistent to make sure that there must be consequences that have actually, that must be done. And there's a recent history into that. So, but we can't just wake up and then just charging people. And actually, we actually blame the whole 350 personnel. What is important, we must go to the bottom of it and give a credible institution in the form of SIU to assist us with that information. So post that information coming to light, we then take the necessary steps.
Let's talk worst case scenario here, Vuyo. If it is revealed that there was such a list that was issued from the Office of the Premier, in light of the big focus on corruption as it pertains to government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, if it does emerge that many companies were involved in the issuing of personal protective equipment, that these companies perhaps did not have the necessary experience in this field of health, that they were given these contracts because of connections they may or may not have had with officials in government, what is the Gauteng government's stance on how it will handle that kind of issue?
Well, we are quite happy with the work that the SIU have actually done at the moment. So they will obviously follow the same route that other companies have already followed. So the SIU is moving with a necessary speed to make sure that civil cases are open and people really are held accountable. So logically, it must actually follow the same route if there's ever been any wrongdoing amongst them.
So you're saying the office of the Premier, let's use the correct term, that the office of the Premier will be the office that will actually take such cases to the SIU?
As we've done and taken previous cases to the SIU, it was the Gauteng government that approached the SIU through its memorandum to say, please assist us to investigate in this particular matter. And indeed, it was found that there is a case to be answered, and some of the issues currently are in court.
Right, right. Well, Vuyo, thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report. He is the spokesperson for the Gauteng Premier, David Makhura, the tribunal correcting an error that essentially implicated the Premier himself, when in fact the term that should have been used in that decision was the office of the Premier. Vuyo Maga, thanks very much for your time.